Hello, everyone, and welcome to BFW 2401 Commercial Banking and Finance. And this is our first lecture. Now, today we are talking about financial institution specialness. I already uploaded for you the slides, and what we are going to talk about today is actually we are trying to answer three questions. Question number one is, what are those financial institutions and why they are different from other business forms like corporations? The second question is, we want to understand what are those special services they provide for us. They provide for the economy and what they provide for their customers. And the third question is why they are highly regulated. So our main concern actually comes with the next question, which is the financial institution specialness. Before I start, I give you this example. If I have a 10 million ringgit today, or $10 million, I have two options. One of those options is I go and put it in a bank and receive some type of return. Or I can go and to the market, which means I go and buy stocks or bonds or other financial securities and receive some type of return for that one. I can, of course, sell my investment, liquidate it later on. This is one option. Or the other options, I can go to the financial institutions like a commercial bank, put my money in a deposit and receive some type of return. The same thing applies to the borrower. This borrower who comes to the bank to take a loan, especially businesses, why they don't go to the market and issue bonds and stocks and collect money from the market directly from those investors. So the question is why we have to go to the financial institutions, and those financial institutions is still prevailing, is still providing good services. The answer is because they provide special services that we cannot do it alone when we go to the market alone. And this is what we call financial institution specialness. And financial specialness is actually the subject of the 36 slides that we are talking about today. Now, having said that, please allow me to share my screen. And then let's go to the slides. So this is my slides. Let me go to the objective of the learning objective of this class, which is first, as I told you, the first thing we want to understand why they are different, why those financial institutions. And when we talk about financial institutions, we are not talking about banks. We are talking about banks. We are talking about building societies, credit unions, financing firms, pension funds. We are talking about insurance company, life insurance companies. We are talking about general insurance companies. I will explain all of those. So it's a package. It's a big list, but the biggest one actually is the banks, which is, we call them commercial banking. So we want to understand why all those institutions, which is an important part of the financial system, are different from commercial firms, which means if I go today and look at public bank in Malaysia, I will find the business model is different from IGM or Sime Derby. IGM is a construction company. Sime Derby is a real estate company that work also in palm oil plantations. So we want to understand what is the difference between the two. And the second one, what are those special services actually provided by those banks? And the third one is why this specialness, why those services they're providing are actually resulting in what we call regulations, why the regulators are very, very concerned about the operations of the banks. They always, under the surveillance of the regulators. They want to know what they are doing. They need regular reporting. They need monthly and sometimes quarterly reporting. But if you have a corporations, maybe you provide your annual financial statements. So this is why regulators come and becomes very, very important part of the operations of financial institutions. And the third one, and then we want to understand if we have a regulations and those financial institutions are subject to regulations, that regulations actually is impacting the efficiency in which they operate. So actually, there is what we call net regulatory burden. That net regulatory burden is actually affecting the efficiency of the banks, which means banks are not really happy about regulations. Talk about the banks in Malaysia, talk about the banks in Europe, in the US, actually, especially when it comes to capital requirements and all those issues, they are not really happy about it. And they think that the regulators are affecting their efficiency. Now, finally, we want to understand, and this is actually from the perspective of the regulators, what is the systematic risk? Which means this regulation is very important, because if we leave the financial institutions operate as they do without control and regulations, then there will be a systematic risk, which means a risk to the whole financial system in the country that affect the shareholders of the banks themselves, and also the other parties, including the economy. Having said that, let's go now to the concept of what you call financial intermediation and financial institution specialness. This slide is actually one of the most important slides. Look, I put it like this, and actually the book put it like this: without intermediation, how do we invest? And this is with intermediation when we go through the financial institutions. So as I told you when I start, if I have a $10 million now, and I want to invest that $10 million, I have two ways. Either I can go and say I can bring my money here and give it to the corporations, which means I can call my broker as an individual investor, whether I am a local investor or international investor. I want to invest in, say, a company like Simdepi in this country, or IGM, or any of those corporations. All I have to do is to call my brokers, or if I am a licensed broker, and go and buy their stocks or bonds, or even sukuk, if you want to talk about those companies who are operating according to Sharia compliant in Malaysia. And then they will give you, you will pass the cash, and they will give you those certificates of investment. Either they give you the stocks, which is shares, which is actually a legal document, or they can give you bonds, which we can receive. We receive stocks. Now you can receive dividends, or you wait until the price of the your shares or your stocks goes up, and you can sell them under what we call capital gain. Or actually you can just buy bonds, and these bonds will give you coupon like a 5% or 6%, during the life of the bond, which is 20 years. So if you pay 1,000 today, they will give you 5% for the next 20 years. After the 20 years in maturity, they will give you your $1,000 back. So this is what's happening in the market. So the two parties actually are directly meeting and exchanging these investments. Somebody has funds, somebody needs the funds. So they will, so this funds, the sector that has a surplus funds, which is the household, will send the money to the sector that needs the funds, or they have a deficit of funds, and then they will give them certificates for that. And then, of course, they would retain their principal plus some type of return. Now, if we are talking about this, we can also talk now about This is what's happening without intermediation, without the financial institutions, which we don't care about it. Now here, if we want to do that, we have to go through someone here, which means I have to go through the banks, and the banks then will go to corporations, which means I will take the 10 million, which I talked about before, and I will give this 10 million to a bank, and they will give me certificate of deposit. They will give me, I can put it as long-term deposit. I can put it as saving account. I can put it as an investment if one of their funds. They will guarantee my principal, and they will take my money and invest it. Now, when they do that, they do it in two ways. And this is where we started to work. So this middleman, which is the financial institutions, which is actually the subject of our work here, this middleman will take the money and send it to the corporations. Now, they can do it under two types of transactions. The first type, they can work as brokers. The second type, they can work as asset transformers. What is the difference? Brokers, there is 400 brokers in this country. There is huge banks in the world who are brokers, like JP Morgan can work as a broker. What you call those Wall Street investment banks work as brokers. In this country, you can have CIMB is very active in brokerage business. You can talk about Hong Leong, even Public Bank and Maybank, but the two other banks, which is CIMB and Hong Leong, is actually the very active banks. So what's happening now is they will buy, if they are brokers, they will buy stocks and bonds. For example, you have a 10 billion, they go and buy from, as I could tell you, Sanderby, some either their bonds or either shares like equities, and then they will pass it to you and they will take a fee. It's over. But they can also do asset transformation, which means they will take your money and they will go and buy like those equities and bonds, and they will keep them with you, and they will give you a certificate of, so you deposited your money in the bank now as a deposit, and they will give you a certificate of deposit, say long-term deposit for 270 days. They will take that money and they will go and invest it in equity and debt. Of course, you know that they are investing it. They are not keeping it in the bank. They can invest it in equities and bonds and some other type of financial securities. And then they will give you a return. Or they can actually take it and invest it in some type of fund. They still also give you a certificate from their own fund, not from, so they have a fund inside the bank that buy all those type of financial securities. And they will tell you, you are investing in our fund. And this is what actually most Malaysian banks are doing. So you enjoy the returns of the equities and debt issued outside in the corporations. So instead of going here directly, you are going through them. So you can go through them as a broker, or as I told you, you can go through them as asset transformer. Now, another concept I want you to understand, these securities, the equity and debt, they will give you equity and debt, some type of securities. We call it primary securities. Now, the securities that issues to us from the financial institutions, like this deposits and the insurance policies, this we call it secondary securities. So please, in this stage, we understand that there is investment. It could be without intermediation, out of the financial institutions, or it could be through the financial institutions. And in the financial institutions also, we can do it in two ways. Either they serve us as a brokers or asset transformers. If you understand this slide, I think this will give you a clear idea of what is financial intermediation, which is our subject for the whole semester. Now, coming back, just to explain what we said, financial institutions fulfill two majors. As I told you, they can work as brokers, as I just have talked about it now, or they can work as asset transformer, and I already explained it. So now in the first form of intermediation, it will be the financial institution act as an agent against some type of fee. And why they do it better than us? Actually, they do it better than us because actually they do so much transactions. They have the expertise and they can actually use what we call the economic of scale. So instead, if I have savings of 10,000 ringgits now, and I buy stocks or bonds in the market, just imagine how much I will pay to my brokers, how much I will pay to transferring the ownership of my of those stocks and bonds. So, but if the bank is buying, they are buying in billions and billions of ringgits or dollars. So actually, the cost of the lawyers facilitating that buying of the brokerage services is minimized because of the economic scale. Now, in the asset transformation issue, coming back, and I will tell you why we are talking about. You remember when I said there is something called primary securities and there is something called secondary securities. This is the primary securities, which is the securities of the corporations. And this is actually the secondary securities. So on the asset transformer, please understand that financial institution that achieves that by buying securities from corporation like stocks or bonds and issuing secondary securities like saving accounts and insurance. Now, financial institutions are better to solve the cost of facing individual making direct investments. So the cost of the investment is we can do it as financial institutions better because of the economic of scale. Now, let me move to the next issue. What if there is no financial institutions in our life? Which means what if we only operate here? Which means we don't have the whole thing and the whole thing, this thing does not exist. We have only the without intermediation. We work without intermediation. What would happen to us or the economy? So without financial intermediation, let me just take this off. Without financial intermediation, the access savings could only be held on cash because, you know, some investors, and there are so many, they don't want actually to go, because when you go through the bank, look, when you go through the bank will take your principal and they will give you, if it is, for example, a long-term deposit, say a deposit for 270 days, or you can have it for 3 years, you can have it even 5 years. They will give you a fixed interest and they will give you also a principal, and both of them are guaranteed. But if you go and invest in corporations, yes, they will give you, in Malaysia now, they give us around 2%, 3% for the fixed deposits. Now, the best way, and I have received 4% before, sometimes it can get to 4%, 4.5. But if you go to corporations, the rate can go to 16%, 15%, but they don't guarantee your principal and they don't guarantee your interest. Yes, you can go up to 23, but you can lose your investments. So some people or some investors, actually those who are not very experienced in the financial market, they don't like that. And there are so many. So in this case, they would prefer to hold their money as cash. If there is no bank who will hold it for me and guarantee at least my principal, I don't want to give it to someone else who will tell me tomorrow that I lost. I just want to keep my principal. And if this is happening, of course, that will mitigate the flow of the funds between the deficit sector, between the surplus factor sector and the deficit sector. So that will lead to our money can be held in cash. The money in the economy will be held in cash, or they can be invested, as I told you, in corporate securities. Therefore, the flow of funds between household savers and corporation is likely to flow if some hold saver decide is likely to be low if some of us actually decide to hold this in cash. So later, this is one problem. The other problem is when I invest my money in the bank, I just go and sleep. I don't do anything. But when it is in corporations, you will be a shareholder or a debt holder. Now, if you are a shareholder or debt holder, you have to monitor how the corporation is using the money. Only financial, what we call institutional investors, huge investing institutions can do that. Me and you as individuals or small investors, actually, or naive investors, actually, we cannot do that monitoring. We cannot impact the corporation how and using the money. So there is always this problem of the corporations will take advantage of those minorities or the shareholders and misuse the funds if there is no monitoring. So if I know that I will give my money and at the same time I have no voice, actually no heard voice and directing the corporations, I can attend the meeting, the general meeting, shareholders, I can talk, but actually I still within this minority. So actually I don't have that impact and monitoring over the corporation. So this is another problem. And so because of the monitoring, I may lose my money, which means there will be a price risk, which means a risk of investment would increase, which means there is a price risk. So there is a possibility that the issue bonds and the corporation go bankrupt. There is a risk that I buy stocks for 20 ringgits and then I don't know what happened. The price is now 5 ringgits. I lost around 75% of my investments. So because of the monitoring and because of the price risk, we can see without, if there is, and this is what's happening when there is no intermediation, no financial institutions inside, maybe some of the money will be held in cash and the flow will be low. Now, somebody would say, okay, what if it is financial institutions? I will tell you now. But even without intermediation, the financial systems in so many countries have been developed, which means now if I'm going to, if Petronas, which is this oil company, Petronas for international students, if we have a lot of international students in our cohort, is one of the biggest, it is actually the largest oil company in this country. They do exploration, whatever. If today they issue bonds for 500 million ringgit, say, and they want to take that money and go invest it. For example, they go and explore for oil in Africa, say Nigeria or Sudan. This is where they operate, and so in some of those countries. Now, actually, when I'm not talking about Petronas as Petronas, but you can talk about any corporation. Bondholders now, when they put their money, they will also put it with what we call certificates, and they will also be the group of bondholders will issue or will impose some restrictions on the operation of the company, and these things we call it covenants with the bonds, which means they control your leverage, they control where you use your money. They do some of those things, which actually mitigate the impact of the monitoring. It make the monitoring better and it decrease the price risk. This is what's happening in real life. So it's like terms and conditions from the bondholders. Okay. Now, let me go now. So because of this monitoring and price risk, household might find direct investment in corporate securities unattractive because of the three things I told you: the monitoring, the price risk, but there is one thing more here, and I want you to be aware of it: liquidity. See, just imagine now you put this 10 million in the bank. In the bank, your principal is guaranteed. Your interest is guaranteed. It's not that much, but it is guaranteed, which means now I don't have to monitor because I don't need to. And there is no price risk. My principal at least will come back actually with a return. There is something else. What if I decide now, if I'm an investment company or if I'm an individual and I wanted to withdraw my money just as of today? They will give you back at least your principal. So in this country, for example, and so many countries, if you have what we call a fixed deposit, we put 10 million, for example, for 270 days. But you want to break it or you want to liquidate it before the 270 days is over. So maybe after 100 days, whatever, the bank will tell you, well, we'll penalize you for that, which means we promised you to give you 4%. Now you will receive only 2%. That's fine, but your principals can go back. Even if they tell you we are giving you return 0, but your principal can be go back. You can receive your principal fully and 100%. Now somebody would say, what if I'm in the market? In the market, you cannot liquidate. For example, if I buy now 1 million share from Scientific, for example, it's not one, say 10,000 shares, and it is for 10 ringgit today, and I want to sell it tomorrow, or even talk about Facebook or Apple or those big companies, and I want to sell it tomorrow. If the market is not liquid and I want to sell it now, liquidate it now, I may sell it for 9.75 because the spread between buying and selling is high. You have to sell less than the market. And the more illiquid the market, like the Malaysian market or those the following markets, the more is the spread between the buying and the selling. So actually, there is a liquidity risk because if you want to liquidate, it may take you some time and then you will lose some of the market value of your shares. So this is 3 important issues I want you to be aware of. And this is what actually mitigate us to encourage us as small investors to invest in banks and financial institutions and not in the market. Somebody would say, but everybody is investing in the market. Yes, I agree with you. Those are funds. Those are experts in the market. Those are actually taking more risk. And when they take more risk, they will not give them 4% or 5%. They can get, a return to 16 and 20 and 25%. If they are smart in choosing the right corporation to invest, they really can enjoy that return. Okay. So this is the whole thing about the financial intermediation and why we go to financial institutions, or why we are actually hesitated to invest in the market, but encouraged to invest in the financial institutions. Okay.